say before, actually that's all I have to say before our next speaker, Homestand Sports. So I'm gonna give a little bit of background and then they can come up and do their thing. Here we go. Homestand Sports, we got Kevin Kennedy and Noah Frankel. Are you a fan of sports? Because this duo will show you how they reinvented sports consumption through various media outlets, and they began producing their own live shows and podcasts to give you all sports all the time, regardless of sport. They do it all. They do all the sports. So join me in welcoming Kevin and Noah of Homestand Sports to tell you about everything they do.
And we do live talks on sports. It's kind of like this, except there's a lot more beer, and it's darker, and the floor kind of sticks because it's like a shitty venue, but it's cool. And as you can see here, we do talks on all sports: puck talks, pitch talks, footy talks, and hoop talks. And I'm going to show you a quick video just to give you an idea of what our show is all about. So if you can throw it to the video to get us going.
You come to this, and it is pretty much as informal as being in somebody's basement talking about the sport we all love. Oh my God, it's Frank Gore. What am I going to say to him? He comes over and he leans over to me and he says, "Kid, I don't want to say that I'm writing anything negative about the Leafs, but can you please tell me if the word up is hyphenated?"
What they've done with it, the pitch talks, guys, it's a really unique, interesting venture, and I think they're just scratching the surface.
All right, I'll moderate this thing. Hello, my name is Sid Sixero, and half of you in this room hate me because of Twitter.
Only half?
Yes, there's Twitter, and people can communicate with baseball analysts and reporters, but doing it like this live in person, it's an opportunity for people to get that first-hand interaction.
Why do you hate Ken Dryden?
Because he's so full of bull.
Who's more full of Ken Dryden or Richard Petty?
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
The thing about sports journalism is that basically you get the tip of the iceberg, but so much of the story is left behind.
I've never written this because he doesn't want it written, so we're all in the trust tree here.
I always would like to show a bit more, but I have to be careful when it's my real job. It's nice to bring down the veil a bit.
And I became a Blackhawks fan for life. Now, I don't like to admit that on the air, so if any of you ever tweet at me and accuse me of being biased, I will deny I ever said this.
You've seen events, obviously, in New York and in Florida, and I think it builds a real community.
We had a pitch talks for the Mets, and that was back in September. It was awesome, so we figured, let's do it in Brooklyn.
You played in a up era, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Can I keep talking?
Absolutely. Does anybody want to go home yet?
People are smart. You know, people know when you're just pounding the company drum. I think it's a healthy evening when you can just really talk about what's going on, regardless of who you're working with. And pitch talks has turned into that kind of evening.
Let's have a huge round of applause.
Okay, great. So I'll start with a few questions that I often get, and we'll go from there. So I often get the question of how did I start this, and I started it because I used to work in music, and I used to throw concerts, and I thought to myself, and I used to go to a lot of conferences like this one. I went to a few TED Talks. I went to see Jason Silva, who's like this futurist guy, and he's cool. And I thought to myself, Mark Maron, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be awesome if we did this, but it was all about sports, and there was beer, and it was just more fun, and people were swearing, and it was a little bit more authentic. So this is Sloan again here, and so then I started Pitch Talks, and it's as simple as that. I just wanted to get closer to the action. I remember I was an intern at the Hockey News, and I would go to the morning skates, and we'd be outside with Pierre LeBrun and Friedman, and before we went in, they would be talking about the real stories, right? They'd be saying, here's what's like really happening. Here's why this guy got traded, here's why, this coach got fired. And I thought, man, what a shame it is just to have that for us, like 5 people there, right? So I wanted to bring it to the stage. And I think the live format is the most important part. when you're in front of people like this, you want to be honest, right? You have that connection. I think if you're in front of a camera, or if you're on the radio, it's a lot easier to just say what people want to hear. So I wanted to bring the fans a little bit closer. And it's also a fact that, players these days and athletes make millions of dollars. They're not like us. They don't live the same lives as us. And the distance between athletes and the fans is just growing and growing and growing. And that pissed me off. So I wanted to have more fun. And I wanted to bring the storytellers closer to people, to the fans like us. And I wanted it to be more honest. So I got James Duthie, and I put a beer in his hand, and he became more honest. And this, and then we get a lot of this, right? And this isn't sports for me, right? It's not painting your face. Sports for me is more of it's a meditative experience, right? It keeps me calm. It sounds weird, but like I listen to podcasts before I go to bed. It's a comfortable space, right? So, and this is not for me. Like what's happening now in a lot of the mainstream media is it just doesn't feel like it's meant for the cerebral sports fan or the fan that just wants to hear the real story. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. So what are these talks? So I put together a formula where I try to find entertaining people. I don't give them a script. Our show is, I wish I had this crew here. Usually it's me and Noah. Noah's doing the front door, and I'm, backstage, right? And, we have no script. We're underproduced on purpose. I don't tell the speakers to do anything, to say anything. It's really crucial that we don't tell them what to do, because that's what they do on TV, right? It's all scripted. And we the venue is a cool part, and I'll get to that afterwards, but it's really important to choose the right venue. The venue will dictate the tone of the night, right? And then there's obviously beer. So this is Hank Azaria, who you might know from The Simpsons. He does Mo, and a few other voices there too. So, it's not only about like getting the media guys, it's about getting actors, getting people from around the sports world. He was on our show. This is Ashley Docking. And this is, the panelist from a Puck Talks. So what I'm trying to do is to give voices to people in groups that you don't see on Sportsnet or TSN. There's Renata Fast, who just won a silver medal with Team Canada, and a few other players from the CWHL. So that's always important. This is a group from our Hoop Talk show as well. So getting into the venues, the Drake Underground, this is a GM. So we started to expand from media to executives. And executives are really interesting to get in a live stage, because they're the ones who really know the stories, And once we went from them, then we started expanding into bigger venues like this. Now, going to the venue, this is, we did a show at BB King's in Times Square. And why I'm talking about this and why Sex and the City is up here, because a lot of times when, you guys know this show? Yeah. So what I hear a lot about this show is that there's a fifth character. Now, does anybody know what this fifth character is? Exactly. So it was really important that they were in New York City. It was a big part of the show. So for me, the fact that we do our shows in venues like the Phoenix, in concert halls, really dictates what we talk about. And it really makes us be more authentic. This is the Metro in Chicago. And this is BB King's there. And this is me in front of the Wilbur in Boston. And, this is the Independent in San Francisco. So the people in our crowd are used to going to other events at this venue. When they come there, they just feel like we are going to talk, we're going to be real, and we are not going to be, full of cliches. So this is the kind of, this is our event in Seattle as well, and this is Brooklyn. So the crowd. So there's another video here with Shapiro who talks about our crowd. If you guys could roll that would be great.
To kick off home opener, Do you feel like this is going to give you a good idea of what Toronto Blue Jays fans are all about?
Well, if I don't have that now, after the last 6 months, then I'm never going to get it. So I think what I'm going to see tonight is kind of what's been told to me, that these are, this is a small group of a subset of fans that are extremely intelligent, extremely smart, very passionate, very invested in the Blue Jays, but also have a much deeper understanding than the average fan.
Yeah, so he's talking about our audience, and trying to build that kind of an audience, it's not like, so I hear a lot of times like, we need to build a community, you need to build that, and it sounds very contrived. You can only build it by building programming that brings in the people that want to see that programming, and you have to care about it. And when you do, then you get the right crowd. And this crowd, my crowd, the community that we've built, very sophisticated, it's very diverse. It's not young and old, it's both, it's everything. And here's some examples of our audience here. This is in Tavistock, Ontario. Like, another part of what we do is we go to where the fans are. So in order to stay in Toronto, we travel. That's in Seattle. And the middle of the picture here is 3 generations of baseball fans came to our show, so I'm pretty proud of that. Now I just wanted to talk briefly about what's coming up in our company, and one of them is our host network. So a key part of our show are the moderators. Your host here, I think his name is Julian. He's great, and like these people are so like core, and I think it's a problem in our mainstream sports media that the anchors of the shows that we have are becoming less and less of a personality. They're sort of swapped in and out on SportsCenter, whereas these, and they're often women, and they're not given a chance to give their opinion. So our hosts are encouraged to give their opinion, to not just host, to be moderators, to be panelists. So I'm pretty proud of that. And what we've started doing is a lot of live streams. I know this event is being live streamed, I think, as well. Our last live stream with Ross Atkins, the GM of the Blue Jays, got picked up on the MLB network. And it's really a new frontier for us, because Twitter has become our broadcast partner. It's a TV channel, and we started live TV shows up there. So every Wednesday we have a prospect show with Scott Wheeler. We have Haley. So these are our young talent that we're trying to cultivate, so that they can provide to be panelists for us in the future. And they come up there every, twice a week. And we started doing some branded events. So I don't know, is anybody a subscriber with The Athletic here? Yeah? Yeah, so we've partnered with them on a few events. I don't know if you guys attended them, but they're a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a U.S. tour with them soon. And with Miller Lite on some baseball events as well. Now we started to sell memberships as well, which is a new frontier for us. So it's a matter of trying to find ways to connect with our community over and over again. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is our academy. So what I found is that the talent pool that I draw from, which are media from the Toronto Star, from Sportsnet and TSN, it's limited, right? As I mentioned before, it's not very diverse. There's just not enough women. So what I've decided to do is create an academy where I can start to work with students, and I can have a mandate to work with more women, more diverse base, and this way we can, there you go. So we're creating content now as part of our academy. So this way, in a few years, I'll have panelists that I can draw from, that I've worked with for a few years, that also look more like Canadians look, right? They represent the fans a lot more than what we're seeing on TV right now. So that's it for me, for the presentation part. I think we'll move into the Q&A portion of the event, and I'll invite my partner, Noah, up here as well. So yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Just like the other Q&As, we'll be using Slido if you have any questions from your seat. And you are more than welcome to come down and use the microphone if you're interested, but if not, Slido works great. So if you guys behind you will have the questions, I can read the ones off of Slido. And if that works for you guys, we'll do it that way. And if anyone wants to come take the mic from me, you're more than welcome. So we'll start with the ones up there.
Don't be shy.
This is a real question? This is like this is from the audience, or it's from?
Yeah, so I'll start off with the audience questions,
Okay.
and they'll start to slowly pop up behind you guys.
I see.
But in your opinion, what is the future of sports media? Where is it headed? And tell us about your journey that way, too.
Yeah, so I get a lot of chance to work with a lot of different media. I took a long drive with Laura Armstrong from the Toronto Star. We went up to Stratford for a show, and yeah, she's worried, right? They just cut all their travel, to going, so the Toronto Star is not traveling anymore with the teams. They cut all their internships. It's tricky. Now, the Athletic is growing, right? So it's, for me, I think people will always be willing to pay for live events because I think there's real value there. But I depend on people creating content. So it's really hard to see where it's going. I like to think that we can be a part of the change, but I still don't know where the money's going to come from. I think it might come from we're doing some work with Twitter now. There's new opportunities to put stuff out there, but I'm not sure if advertisers are as motivated to spend money on it. So we'll see. The money's got to come from somewhere, and the Athletic is getting it from us. I don't know if that's sustainable.
Did you have any thoughts as well?
Pretty bang on, so.
Awesome. So our next question is, where did both of you begin your media careers? Do you have experience outside of live stuff? Did you guys go to university for different media things? Kind of what was your journey to get to where you're at now? A lot of us are in university, and a lot of people here are in that sort of same path, so I'm sure they're very curious to see how you form that path into where you're at.
For sure. So, I mean, I think it's super important to, when it comes to the sports industry, to really start from the bottom. You hear stories from Alex Anthopoulos, who started in the mailroom, who's a former GM of the Blue Jays and is the GM for the Atlanta Braves. So it's really going into universities, trying to find, whether it's working with your university or working for some sort of grassroots team. I was lucky enough to work for the MLSC, so the Toronto Maple Leafs, Leafs, Raptors, TFC, in the box office, and really got a sense of what it took to work in the industry. And then as that went on, I decided to move to London to work for the Olympics and play semi-professional baseball. So it's kind of getting the sense of, the playing side as well as the business side, and just growing with that. And I think it's important, working with Homestand Sports now, it's really important to find what you're good at and what's best for you. A lot of the times, like Kevin mentioned, working in the mainstream, like for the Leafs, Raptors, it's really commercialized. It's not really meaningful sometimes. But when you work for a company like Homestand Sports, you really get the feeling of what kind of personalities these people that you see on TV and the athletes and the executives kind of see. So that's a bit of my career path.
Yeah, so I went to Concordia in Montreal, and I used to write for The Link, which was an extremely left-wing newspaper, but I wrote sports. And I got to write a lot about women's sports, and so I started doing journalism there. Then I moved to Taiwan for a few years to teach English, and then I came back and I did internships. Do you guys remember the iWeekly magazine? It was like before the Grid. So I did an internship there, and I did an internship at the Hockey News. So that's where I started. And I think from there, that's how I got into the press boxes. It was like pretty much volunteering. So I got to go to all the morning skates and stuff like that. So that's where I got exposed to, like I said in this, that like I was seeing Friedman and these guys there, and I was like, that's the story. Like this little like circle of us, at the ACC talking about the Leafs, like that's the news. What was getting out there in the public was like 10% of what I was hearing. It just felt weird. So that's where I started.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, where'd it go? It was, who's your favorite guest speaker you guys have had in the past? But I'd like to add on to that with saying, how did you make those connections? How did you get that to even happen? Because that can be a large jump in itself.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to get the people to join on your mission, your cause, and It sounds like you guys are very passionate
Right.
about it. So how did you get those people, and who were they?
So the first event happened where I got Shai Davidi's email address from my brother who used to write for the Star, and I emailed him. It was just a cold email. I said, this is my idea. I want to do a talks. It's like TED Talks, but it's about baseball. It's at this place. Do you want to do it? And he said yes. And from there, I just sort of used the fact that he said yes. So I got Dan Schulman's email address. And then eventually, within that year, we did a show with Alex Anthopoulos, and it was right before that big run in 2015 with the bat flip and stuff. And looking back, I could tell that he knew he was gonna either get fired or quit, because he was just so candid. He was just swearing and he didn't give a fuck. He was just saying this and that, and he was like, that was and he stayed afterwards and he sat on the stage and he greeted every fan on the way out. And that was a really cool experience. We've had a lot of guests like that. We had some Ken Rosenthal, who's a big insider, and we flew him in. And we had a player on that show too, a guy named Jesse Litch, who had like 3 years with the Jays and stuff. And he was on the show too. When the show was done, he was standing there all by himself. Ken Rosenthal had a receiving line, at a wedding afterwards, because the people that come to our shows really wanted to see the storytellers, to get the inside track.
Noah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say Homestand Sports is definitely really good at the cold email. That's how I started. I emailed Kevin and said, hey, I love what you're doing. I see this and this in your business that could potentially grow, so that we're definitely good at that. But my favorite panelist is probably a guy named Bob Kendrick. We flew him in a couple weeks ago from Kansas City. He's the head of the Negro Baseball Museum in Kansas City. And besides from his knowledge of baseball and his knowledge of sport, he really taught me, and I think a lot of the audience, and why the show was such a success, is really teaches you how to act as a person and be as a person. You don't really see that when it comes to watching Sportsnet or TSN, so I would say that was my favorite.
That's awesome. Our top question right now is, what's the trick to creating an engaging podcast that includes back and forth with your audience? So I think a lot of people are not only making content, audio like podcasts, but there's also videos and photography and journalism of all types. How can people make that more engaging? And I know you said earlier you have, at the end of these shows, some of your guests, and including yourselves, are talking to all these fans and meeting them, but how can they do that in an environment that's not so literally face-to-face as we are today or in your shows?
So what I find is that you can't create that kind of an engagement. You actually have to live an interesting life and go out and have experiences and then talk about them. A lot of the podcasts I have, and I love the students that I work with, right? But at this stage, they haven't really had any experiences that they can bring, right? I would say that you really need to try and have some experiences and live an interesting life. And even though you're talking about sports, you can get opinions anywhere, especially now. Opinions are everywhere, and they're free, and they're coming at you, right? Who cares, right? Who cares about your opinion or my opinion, right? But if I'm bringing at it a really cool experience that I had some kind of interaction, I think then you'll be able to get sticky and get a lot of listeners. But I don't think it's something that my students too. They're I can see the effort in trying to be engaging, and I don't think that's something that you can just make up. I think you have to actually live an interesting life and try to have some cool experiences.
Noah?
Yeah, I would say just engaging with the fans. I think that's super important, because at the end of the day, you're creating content, or specifically a podcast, for your listeners. So you want to do what the listeners are looking for.
Yeah, but it's what are you going to do? Use this hashtag or use this thing? I find that it's everybody's doing that, and we're all spinning our wheels. I think that it's much more interesting if you spend some time to create a really unique product and really be deliberate about that. Even now, a lot of stuff is not scripted. Now, my show's unscripted, but a podcast, I find that if you're not doing your preparation, right, I just don't understand why I should care about your opinion, right? It's so easy to get a podcast now, right? You got a microphone, and now I got a podcast. Everybody's got probably 20 people here have a podcast, right? So it's just like, I would much rather hear where the effort is, because if the effort is just, here's what my opinion is, I don't know where you're going to go with that, because you're up against everybody else who also has an opinion. You know, I'd say do your homework.
Do your homework and find what it is that you're passionate about so you can really push your message the best way you can.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And then for our last question, something that's kind of been our theme of the day is success. So what is success on your terms, your path? What is it to you, each and you individually? That'll be our last question.
Yeah, we're still looking for it. Like, I'm at meetings all the time. Like, this week I had meetings with The Athletic. We had calls with them in San Francisco. I had a meeting at Twitter this week too. I don't know yet, you know, like it seems like I thought I had success, you know, like as these giant shows were happening, 1,000 people there's lineups outside, and then it's over, right? And they're like, oh, I gotta do that again and again. I gotta do that 100 times a year. I think what I'm trying, I really think I can have an impact. I really think I can shift how a fan experiences sports. So I want to see that. I want to continue on that path. I think, like I said in the presentation, I think the distance between athletes and teams is growing, and I want to shrink that in a way. And I don't know how to yet. I'm still working on that. But like, I look at the Maple Leafs, right, and like none of their guys would ever speak on the show, right? Like Lou has like a ban on that. They can't have beards. Like it pisses me off that they don't really want to engage with us. And not just my show, right? I think teams and sports, they belong to us, the fans. The club belongs to us. It doesn't belong to whoever owns it, right? They're just stewarding it for now. So success will be if those barriers, they shrink, and we all have a little bit more healthy experiences as fans. Another thing I want to do is I want to take away like what through this experience, it's been nice, like, because I've had to go to other markets, and I've had to like pretend not to be a Jays fan so that they would still like me there in St. Louis. And you know what? It's really nice. It's really nice to like all the teams, because then if they're good, you're really like it just feels healthier, right? Than to really go up and down. Like, can you imagine like my happiness is like attached to Austin Matthews? He's like some 20-year-old, like why would I attach so much happiness to this? Like, when I was just 20, I was a fucking lunatic, right? Like, I would never, like, it's absurd, right? So now I've sort of leveled off. I enjoy sports, all sports, all teams, all players, you know? And I think that's the path, I think. So we'll see if I can make an impact that way.
Awesome. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much to Noah and Kevin.